French teaching, and therefore all Algerians who would like to teach and learn Arabic in primary school, they would have to get a license from the French colonization, and which is pretty much impossible at that time because the only available language of teaching at that time was the French, and therefore they were not allowed to teach the Arabic unless you get a license, which is just an administrative procedures, which means that you cannot do this. And I mean, you cannot really go through the procedures of having the license because only very, very, very few people can get the license. Um, and one of the testimony of my grandfather, who is still alive, he said we used to teach the Arabic language and the Quranic sciences outdoors, just in case we see the French colonization or the French presence coming toward us. We don't want to be caught teaching the language and teaching the Quranic sciences. Otherwise, the punishments would be very severe. So the belonging would be, seized and burns to the ground along with the house, and as a punishment of teaching Arabic without telling the French colonization that you are teaching an Arabic language and the Quranic sciences without a permit from them. So that was the first step from the French colonization to try and detach the Algerian people from the linguistic and the cultural, I would say most often the religious roots. The second thing they did, the French colonization, is they tried to support and encourage and fend some of the superstitious practices and the practices that go against the Islamic monotheism in Algeria. And mainly there is the Zerda practice, and there is the religious speeches in the mosques. So all the religious speeches in the mosque at that time during the colonization period were not allowed to be written and authenticated by the Algerian religious people unless it goes under an French authority of scrutinizing the content. And of course, the speech would be accredited by the French colonization, which usually encouraged those kind of superstitious practices. The other thing is the Zerda, which is an annual gathering that many Algerian towns used to have, uh, and they do come up with the certain practices that go against the religious practices in Algeria, which is in favor of the French colonization, that are pretty much funded and encouraged by the French colonization at the time. The third thing is the waves of evangelism in Algeria and preaching the Christianity instead of the Islamic faith. So that's the first thing that the French colonization did to try to detach the Algerians from their linguistic and religious roots. The second thing, which is the cinematic Western culture, is pretty much a sort of a privilege. I would say a privilege because in the eyes of the colonization, it is a privilege for the metropolitan cities uh, versus the suburb cities, which the suburbs region, which they don't have this kind of privilege, the cinematic Western culture. So they often the cinematic Western culture with such kind of movies that preach or glorify or advertise for the French culture and French language at the expense of the local cultures and the languages. The third one, it has to do with the burning of Algiers University, and it took place just 1 month ahead of Algeria independence. That took place on the 5th of July in 1962, and the burning of Algiers University took place on the 7th of June, exactly 1 month prior Algeria's independence. So basically, France knew that the French colonization knew that they were leaving Algeria, and therefore they attempted this kind of burning the library. So more than 600,000 manuscripts and books were burned, lost. Few of them were stolen and taken to France, to the National Archives in Marseille. So I would say this is pretty much a summary of the cultural genocide during the colonization, and this created sort of a linguistic and cultural problems and issues that we are still living until nowadays. Just save the time. So I'll move to talk about the glottopolitical dynamics of languages. And of course, we have different languages in Algeria. Some of them are native, some of them are foreign, but the classification of what is native and what is foreign comes to the decision of the policymakers in Algeria that are in a very controversial uh, decision of what to make and what not to make according to certain political agendas. But according to the discourse of the regime, to the discourse of the constitution, we have the Arabic, as I have just classified them here in this slide. We have the Arabic language, which is the official language in Algeria, which is sort of the highest status language. It is spoken in universities, government, mosques, administrations, I would say. And then there is the colloquial Arabic, which is a low status Arabic, knowing that Algeria is a diglossic society with high status and low status variety of Arabic. Then there is the Tamazight, which is the Berber, spoken by sort of a minority of people, I would say 4 to 5 provinces. Here in Algeria, we call them wilayas, um, with no pretty much a standardized language, I would say, but just a bunch of group of dialects all together. Then there is the French, and then there is the English language. And there is this sort of rivalry that is going on between the French language and the English language in Algeria. But the reality is completely different. The reality, we just have to take the classification upside down. So we start with the French language, which is in reality the official language in administration, in the government, in universities, and then comes Arabic, and then comes the colloquial Arabic, and then comes Tamazight, and perhaps the English is the last stop. So this kind of linguistic complicated repertoire creates some kind of issues concerning the language, concerning the culture, concerning the identity, who we are exactly. So this is pretty much coming in the next slide, where my friend Abdelzak will just join in and continue the presentation. Abdelzak, can you please start from this slide?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So before I start, I think it will be good to thank the conference organizers for this fascinating conference. I just also appreciate the cooperation and collaboration with conference organizers, and I hope that the conference will be a template for future events. So in my presentation, I'm going to talk about the clash between languages in Algeria. First of all, I would like to speak about the clash between Berber. For those who are not familiar with the word Berber, it implies the language, the culture, the identity of Berbers, whom they are ethnic group in Algeria, but they think themselves as the indigenous people of the country. So according to many historians and according to many scholars, the beginning of the clash happened when, so the beginning of the clash happened in 1975 and reached its peak in 1985. However, I can tell that the origin of this clash started during the colonial period. When the French came to Algeria in 1830, they were very familiar.
Sorry to interrupt, Can you please share the presentation? It's not appearing in your screen.
Okay, sorry about that. Is it shared now?
Yes, it is.
Is it shared? Can you see the slides?
Yes, we can see the editor's mode. So if you want to launch your presentation.
So can you see the slides?
Yes, sir. We can see the slides in the editor's mode.
Okay, so as I was saying, according to many historians, the clash between Arabic and Berber happened in 1975 and reached its peak in 1985. However, I can tell that the origin and the roots of this clash happened during the colonial period. So what happened is the French were very familiar with the ethnic nature and socio-linguistic culture of Algeria. So when they came to Algeria, they created a big division between Arabs and Berbers. They made a blockade on the Berber areas. They evangelized them. They gave them more opportunities and chances to go and learn, to go to French schools and colleges. As a result of this, the Berbers were very open to French language, to French culture. They also believed in the integration of Algerian society within that of France. So the Arabs were not happy. They became suspicious. They said that the Berbers, are open to France. They are not loyal. They gave up Islam, and this is how the clash occurred. In the late 1960s, France encouraged, financed, and supported the foundation of the Berber Academy. The Berber Academy is a language body in Paris, which is responsible for the upgrade of Berber language, culture, and also the establishment of Berber identity in Northern Africa. When the former president of Algeria, Houari Boumediene, came to power in the mid-1960s, he worked to curtail the use and the expansion of Berber language and culture. So he tried not to give it a chance to be used and to be upgraded. So this is, in summary, the beginning of the clash. Now, the most serious thing, and the more the more interesting thing about this clash, about this language clash, is that it is taken an ethnic and social and ideological dimension. And this is probably why we choose to write about the subject of languages in Algerian education. That is to make politicians and policymakers aware that the issue of language is at the center of national unity, ethnic and social security and peace. And therefore, politicians from both sides, Arabs and Berbers, need to be careful about taking it further, taking it far, taking it extreme. Otherwise, it's very likely that we see and experience a linguistic revolution here in Algeria. So this is probably one of the main aims why we choose to write this book. So I was saying that the Berber Arabic clash taking a social dimension. It will take me ages to summarize this social clash, but I can tell that in 1985, in the history of Algeria, we find the Black Decade, or the Black Spring, or the Amazigh Spring, in which hundreds of people revolted against and rebelled against the Algerian government, asking for freedom. They were also asking for autonomy. They asked also that Tamazight and Berber language and culture has to take over rather than Arabic and Islam. So that started, the conflict, or the social conflict, started in 1985. And then what is happening today, and what happened in the Berber city of Gardaya in the south of Algeria, where both Berbers, Gardayans or Mozabites, and Arabs are always in a fight, while casualties and hundreds of deaths and injuries happened from both sides. Recently, there was an Algerian political figure called Naima Salhi, who said that she won't allow her daughter to learn Berber language written in the Latin script. She was highly attacked from Berberists, saying that this is a kind of discrimination, linguistic discrimination and racism towards Berbers. And the conflict and the social conflict is always taking time and taking place. Sorry, the Berbers don't allow, some of them, in order not to generalize, they don't allow their daughters to be married to Arab Muslim men. Okay, so they choose only Berber brides and Berber husbands for their daughters and their children. So this is exactly the Berber-Arabic social conflict. Now, I would like to talk about the Arab-French. So when the French came to Algeria, they attacked Arabic. They stopped the teaching of Arabic. They closed mosques and Islamic colleges where Arabic is taught. And as a result of this was, as a linguist called Jamila Mokran called it, a linguicide. So Algerians could speak only non-standard colloquial Arabic, okay, which they were taught in families, in their families at home, and they could not speak and write standard Arabic, the modern standard Arabic, the MSA. When Algeria got independence in 1965, Arabization as a movement was launched, in which Algerians, nationalists and patriots wanted to, limitate the use of French in administration and in education. Now the third clash, well, actually I don't call it clash, but I call it a relationship of interest between the Berbers and the French. The relationship between both is very good. So it is in Paris where the Berber Academy is. It is the French who gave the Latin script to the Berber language, which was written before in the Tafnag. That's a special scripture. And the French gave more chances of immigration to Berbers compared to Algerians or to Arabs. And this is in the words and in the mouth of the former ambassador of France here in Algeria. So this is simply the clash and its seriousness in contemporary Algerian society. Now, what we mean by fossilization is the fact fossilization is so what we mean by fossilized foreign languages and cultures is the ideologies of inferiority and superiority from colonization. Immigration played a great role in seeing French and considering French language and culture as superior. Some families, Algerian families, Arab-speaking families living in France, do not teach their children Arabic because they say our children don't need French. They don't need Arabic. They are simply because they are living in France. So the only language that they need is French. Some families here in Algeria prefer speaking only in French, and they are very proud of being part of the Francophone and Francophile. This is simply what we mean by fossilization. Now, the Westernization and Americanization, we dealt with this theme when we analyzed some cultural representations, and we showed that these representations are ideologically biased and politically biased. The last points we are trying in our book to we are trying simply in our book to suggest that in order to resist cultural imperialism and language imperialism in Algeria, we need to give more priorities to local cultures to be taught in education. We need also to secure individuals from colonial cultures. We need also, as I suggested also, that we need to teach our colonial history, which was hidden through through Western writings and through literary and cultural writings produced either in France or in America or even in Britain. So this is my presentation. I will be more happy if you can ask me questions. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gassi. Sorry to cut your presentation short, but I'm sure you understand that we're working on a very
Bir tane Dinç Hoca bir şey paylaşmış da.
very tight time
Çanakkale
frame.
Üniversitesi.
Sorry, so I was saying that I'm sorry to have to, having to cut your presentation short. We're having to work on this very tight time frame, but I'm sure we do have time for a few questions from the audience. So if you feel you want to ask questions, could you please raise your hand or just unmute your microphone and just go ahead and ask the question you want to ask. Let me just check the audience on this gallery mode. Right, looks like we don't have questions, so nothing left to be said, but thanking our speakers today. Again, I'm sorry to just having to cut to your presentation short in the middle of such an interesting debate. I'm sure that questions will be welcome. If you could please share your email address so that we can, I think I got it here. I can just share it from my.
Yeah. I think that our email addresses are given in the first slides of the presentation.
Sure. Yeah, and the album that was shared with all the participants. So thank you very much for your participation, and we're moving into our next presentation. So if you, let me just try to get things straight here, because all of a sudden I've lost the control here. Oh, there seems to be one question though. So if you want to just address that question in the meantime we get things sorted here. How are you resisting colonialisms via teaching? And there's another comment. Thank you for this informative and interesting presentation. Thank you very much for your presentation. So if you want to address that question, it'll be great. I guess you can view them in the Zoom chat box, right? How are you resisting colonialisms via teaching?
Abdulrazak, can I respond to this?
Yeah, excuse me, say again.
Someone was asking about the imperialism in education and how can we get rid of the education in imperialism.
Yeah, first of all, we are not against the teaching of foreign languages and cultures in Algerian educational system. We are simply saying that we need to avoid politicizing, ideologizing Algerian educational system by working on how to say on imperialism, making it imperial, work for ideological interest of certain country in a certain culture. Sorry. So this is exactly what we are saying. How to avoid imperialism in Algerian educational system? I think we need to give the chance to our local cultures, which are so many and so diverse, to be taught in educational system. Okay, so Algerians would learn more and more about someone's other Algerians' local cultures. Okay, this is number one. Number two, I think we need to teach our Algerian history, our Algerian culture, which is hidden, yeah, as a result of the bombing of the University of Algiers library, through Western writings. So in my PhD thesis, for example, I found a huge cultural reserve about Algeria, about the Algerian past, which unfortunately do not exist in contemporary Algerian libraries, because that's gone. That was either burnt or taken away into Marsilia. So I was suggesting that we can use the Western writings, the 19th century travel writings, Charles Dickens' journals all the year round and household words, French writings as well. This is to show that we are not against anybody, to learn about our own culture and about our own history. Okay, so this is probably how to minimize cultural imperialism and language imperialism in Algeria, and that would benefit more Algerian students because we will be more fair with them. we won't deviate from the pedagogical, linguistic and cultural aims of learning into working on a special agenda and a special politicized agenda.
Hola, buenos días. Mira, ya estoy aquí para si me asignas el rol porque no tengo el rol de co-host en la sala. No puedo compartir la pantalla ni puedo tener los privilegios de co-host. Hola, buenos días.
Hola, buenos días. En este momento el host está en la sala 2, pero ya se le contactó y en un segundo va a venir acá.
Es que nos estamos atrasando con el schedule de la sala y yo debería estar allá. Entonces, bueno.
Ya un momentico,
Sí.
profe, ya le estamos ayudando.
Vale.
Mil disculpas por los inconvenientes. Se realizarán ajustes en el horario. Walter, qué pena te pregunto. ¿El host era la persona que estaba compartiendo pantalla
Es que
en la sala 1?
no sé cómo asignaron los roles, la verdad, porque se supone que yo debería ser el co-host como chair, pero como nadie llegó, como que me lo asignaron de afán, yo pude empezar a grabar, pero bueno, una especie de confusión ahí. Lo único que necesito es volver a la sala, iniciar con la segunda presentación, porque el segundo presentador debe estar esperándome en este momento y ya haber un silencio ya incómodo.
Ya eres co-host, Walter.
Ok, vale, entonces ya entro nuevamente a la sala.
Dale, voy a frenar tu grabación porque estás activando la...
Yeah, you can stop.
I am listening.
Can you please
Yes.
stop sharing the presentation so that other people can present?
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
all right. I think I got the control back. Sorry, I apologize. There was a problem with the role setting here, but it seems like everything's gone back to normal. All right, thanks very much to our presenters. As I said before, now it's turn for our second set of presenters. So if I may.
Well, Walter, it's fine since you were not here. The second presenter was not here either, so we give the floor to the third group of presenters and Samantha, and then we'll start right now.
All right, right. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Okay, great. Are you sure we can continue?
Yeah.
And can everybody see the screen?
Sure, Samantha.
Yes, we
good
can see
morning.
the screen.
Yes, we can see the screen. We can hear you loud and clear.
Great, thanks. Good morning. My name is Dr. Samantha Curl, and I'm an assistant professor here at the University of Bath, and I'm with my colleague, Cezanne.
Hello, I hope you are all fine. I am Dr. Sezen Arslan. I'm a assistant professor doctor of English language teaching. I'm working at Van Yüzyıl University in Turkey.
And we're privileged to be here today to present at the 21st International Conference, the International Association for Languages and Intercultural Communication. It's quite a mouthful, but hopefully today you'll find our presentation interesting. We're going to present a study that we did titled An Investigation of the Sustainable Development Goals of Gender Equality in English as a Foreign Language Textbooks in Turkey. Just to give you a quick overview, we'll give you a bit of background to the whole topic, covering key concepts such as statistics on gender equality and introducing the Sustainable Development Goals. We'll then move into our particular study, the research question, methodology, findings, discussion, what it all means, what the implications are for pedagogy as well as policy, and then give you some concluding thoughts and directions for further research if you'd like to pick up this topic for yourself, for your own research. So I'll hand over to Cézanne, who will give us the background.
Okay, now I will provide you with some background information about gender equality and gender inequality. So let's see. The United Nations International Children's Emergency Fund estimates that girls between the ages of 15 and 19 receive 2.5 times less education than their male counterparts. So apart from this educational issue, also there is a violence issue, because 1 in 7 women and girls has experienced physical and sexual violence by an intimate partner within the last 12 months. And also we see the underrepresentation of women in professional life, particularly in the organizational power and decision-making position, because you see the representation of women in social life, economic life is very low, and also women are more vulnerable to violence and in education, let's say. So in order to provide a solution to this problem, to these violence issues, to this underrepresentation in economic and social life, in 2015, the United General Assembly announced the Sustainable Development Goals. So as you see on the screen, there are 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and they cover a broader area from poverty to climate change, from life below water to decent work, to clean energy, etc. And as you see here, gender equality is the number 5 SDG. So if we want to clarify, if to clarify the gender equality, it says gender equality, also known as sexual equality or equality of the sexes, is a state of equal ease of access to resources and opportunities regardless of gender, including economic participation and decision-making, and the state of valuing different behaviors, aspirations, and needs equally regardless of gender. Because gender is a societal role, but sex is just a biological endowment. So actually gender equality covers all kind of identities, your societal identities in terms of gender. So the aim of this SDG, I mean gender equality, are to end discrimination against women and girls across the world and encourage their full participation in social, political, and economic activities. And apart from that, to eliminate all forms of violence against all women and girls, because in the beginning of the slide we said that women and girls are more vulnerable to violence and discrimination. So in order to develop an awareness, in order to develop a familiarity to this gender inequality and to solve this problem, actually we need education, and it's called Education for Sustainable Development. Yes, we have 17 Sustainable Development Goals, but so how can we generate awareness? How can we generate familiarity to them? So of course, it is the education. So ESD, Education for Sustainable Development, includes knowledge, skills, and attitudes to promote SDGs. And it's a lifelong process, so it's not limited to any kind of stage. I mean, it's not limited to preschool education or tertiary education, but it's a lifelong process. So it means it's a continuous learning. And it is an important aspect of quality education. Maybe you remember the SDG number 4 is quality education. So actually, education for sustainable development is also a part of quality education here. So based on this understanding, actually, I want to give some information about Turkey, where I live and where I was grown. Turkey is a founder member of OECD, so that means Turkey strives its best to catch those SDGs and to develop an awareness of the sustainable development. So it carries so many policies. And according to 2023 education vision, because it's by the way, the Turkey just developed this education vision, and it prioritizes these 4 SDGs: quality education, gender equality, decent work, and reduce inequality. So that means Turkey endeavors its best to emphasize those SDGs, and among them we see gender equality here as well. And in Turkey, English is the only compulsory language, so we don't use any other foreign language. I mean German, French, but we see English as a compulsory language in the curriculum. And textbooks are mandatory, so there is a top-down implementation actually, and no other materials are officially approved. So this means that we value English because English is a lingua franca, and lots of people try to learn it, and lots of people speak it around the world. So Turkey actually values English as well. So inspired from these facts and these realities across the world, we decided to, me and my colleague, my dear colleague, decided to conduct a study, and we formed some research questions. And these research questions are as follows: are SDGs represented in the senior high school English as a foreign language syllabus in Turkey? So here we will pay particular focus on gender equality. And the second question is, do teachers think this should be reflected in the main content of the textbook? So again, we will pay special attention to gender equality throughout our presentation.
So the methodology we used was to look at the Turkish high school English as a foreign language textbooks, EFL textbooks. And this EFL syllabus is a written document provided by the Turkish government. It can be downloaded from the government website. And we looked at 4 different high school textbooks, and we've listed them there for you. And as you can see, we looked at 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade textbooks. We also conducted 11 semi-structured interviews with English language high school teachers to further understand to what extent they think that the SDGs should be included in EFL textbooks. And we took qualitative content analysis to investigating both textbooks as well as these interviews. We adopted the SDG framework suggested by the UN as a comprehensive guide to explore the content that we were looking at in terms of the interviews and the textbooks. And this framework consists of learning objectives, suggested topics, and learning approaches identified for each SDG. And so we used a priori coding to categorize the codes based on this SDG framework provided by the UN. So as for the findings, Suzanne, would you like to continue?
So as for findings, we find a limited representation of SDGs. So there are many issues about environmental issues. So the main focus on environmental issues, but sustainable development is not that a limited area. So it should cover lots of different issues as well. And according to other scholars' study, it is also found that gender stereotyping is the most found aspect. So that means stereotypical jobs for women, because nurses, so women, we can say women are depicted as nurses, receptionists, and caregivers. So they think that female do this kind of jobs, and females are excluded from participation in daily leisure and sports activities, such as footballers or basketball players are just depicted as male characters here. So if we look at the example here, which we found on textbooks for 10th grade and 12th grade, let's look at the first example. It says, look at the activity C. In while you read again, identify the differences between the educational and technological lives of people in the past and the ones in the 21st century. Make sentences as in the examples. In the past, there weren't so many schools. Some people believed education wasn't that important, so they did not want their daughters to go to school. So this is the actually highlighted part here. And in the 21st century, there are lots of schools and people believe education is extremely important. So everybody wants their children to get a good education. So this is an excerpt from textbook for 10th grade, and it emphasized the gender equality in terms of the educational issues here. And if you look at the example B in the bottom, so we see, for example, in the top, we see here, I wasn't living in a small village where girls weren't allowed to go out of the house. We were supposed to help our mothers all the time. It was so boring to be home all the time. So as you see, there is, again, the stereotyping, because girls are just people who can do home errands, just cleaning, etc., etc. here. Okay, for the interview data, actually, 4 teachers stated that, as you see, we just conducted interviews with teachers as well, and they said that yes, gender equality should be definitely a part of textbooks, and it is an appropriate theme when we consider their age and their proficiency. So teachers stated that if equality could be achieved all around the world, no one would be excluded due to gender, religion, and disability, and inclusive education thus could be achieved because we can develop a familiarity, we can develop an awareness, we can inform the people about it. And here are some example quotes. For example, a female teacher who is 30 years from Turkey says it should be in the textbooks to prevent gender stereotyping. And another teacher says gender equality must be voiced in textbooks in a way that attaches importance to the women's economic empowerment. Yes, my dear colleague.
So what does this all mean? So as you can see, we found clear examples of gender inequality representing women in the home, and this is where they belong, and they should be doing this, and not, and also if they were represented as doing jobs, they were nurses or caregivers. So what does this all mean? So compared to previous research and previous literature, looking at Ethiopian EFL textbooks, the author actually went out to look at the textbooks in terms of peace values. And a surprising finding was that there was gender stereotyping throughout the textbook, and this actually contradicted peace values. So there is evidence in textbooks around the world that gender stereotyping is still being, these types of stereotypes are still being printed in textbooks. In terms of Turkish EFL textbooks, previous studies in 2018 and 11 found that males outnumber females in terms of females were depicted as conducting all the sort of household activities. And in 2015, there was an overrepresentation of males in occupation. So females are represented as not having a job, staying at home and taking care of the children. So what does this mean for policy and for practice? So some of our recommendations are for textbooks to use non-sexist language, and also in terms of the images that are produced, not to stereotype, basically. It sounds simple, but it seems that these nuances in images particularly are not being taken into consideration. We recommend a balance. There should be a balance in terms of representation of women and men. So gender equality doesn't mean that we now necessarily exclude men. It's just to ensure that there's a balanced representation of men and women in all types of occupations, all types of settings. So showing men as stay-at-home dads, for example. This is important to represent a balanced representation of what's happening in the world. Also, themes related to gender equality should be given a place in the textbooks. For example, discussing International Women's Day, or bringing up sensitive topics such as gender-based violence. And this is really important, obviously at an age with which the children, the high schoolers can comprehend such information. But this is important to expose that to students at an early age, and to ensure that boys know how to respect girls and what is gender-based violence, etc. Textbooks can also direct students to campaigning, starting their own projects. So for example, here's a poster by the UN, so we could run activities for students to create their own poster, hold their own campaigns, awareness campaigns, just within their own local communities, within their own school. So these awareness campaigns we can encourage students to take part in. Or some other activities such as making a documentary. Students will learn a lot through this process and also produce, exercise their creativity and produce something that they can share with the world. So just to give you some concluding thoughts, and in terms of future research, we recommend that widening the textbooks analyzed beyond English as a foreign language textbooks, because we don't think this is an issue just related to EFL textbooks. Any sort of academic subject textbooks need to be analyzed for these types of stereotypes. Also, future analysis should include more textbooks. So we only looked at 4 textbooks which were officially approved by the Ministry of Education in Turkey, widely used by state schools. But the fact is there were only 4 textbooks included, and this really needs to be widened. Also multimodal analysis, so looking at, we were talking about images, looking at the visual aspects of textbooks and how gender is represented in the in images, and then also cross-contextual analysis. So this study only focused on Turkish context, so comparing different contexts. So we could possibly look at Ethiopia, go back to that context and see how the similarities or differences are between contexts across the world. So cross-contextual analysis is really important as well. So this is a key reference. This is the recently published paper on this topic. So if you have any issues accessing this paper, do let us know. We can send that to you. If you have any interest in reading further about this research. And then we've given you your our contact details there, so please do feel free to get in touch with us if you'd like to collaborate or discuss this research further. So yeah, thank you very much for your attention, and we hope to hear from you via email. And hopefully, yeah, that was a useful presentation. Thank you for your attention. Do you have any questions?
All right, thanks very much to our presenters on such an interesting topic and just sensitive topic as well, which could pretty much work out in every other country around the world, especially, thinking about our country in Colombia, this could pretty much work very well. So now it's question time. So we want to invite the members of our audience, if there are questions, just feel free to just unmute your microphone and just ask your questions. Okay, Mr. Molina, you got the floor now.
I think you're muted.
Yeah.
Mr. Molina, we can't hear you.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just me.
Yes. Hello. Good morning,
There we go.
Samantha and Cesar. It's great to see you.
Yeah, hello.
Thank you very much for attending our conference. It was really a pleasure to listen to your presentation. A very interesting topic. I actually connected to it very much because for one of my pedagogy classes, we actually touch upon sexist language and like gender issues in one of the units that we covered. And we study we discuss, or we have discussions in the class based on case studies. And one of the questions is about that, how sexist language can affect the learning of especially girls, and it's also interesting that in my courses, most of my students are female. So it's really interesting to hear, their perceptions about this. So anyway, I have a question. I'm hoping it's not too difficult, or if there's an answer to it, I don't know, but because your study is so interesting, how possible would it be for your study, for the conclusions that you made after your study, to influence policy. Would that be possible? Like, how possible would that be? Maybe at the national level, maybe that's too much, but at the school level, I don't know.
Sezen, would you like to start?
Yeah. Yes, in Turkish setting, actually, these studies are very important because they have the value to inform the policies. Because at the end of the semesters or at the end of the academic years, those textbooks are evaluated. And while they are evaluated, their evaluation is based on the studies conducted by the national scholars related to Turkish context, or by some international studies, but related to Turkish context. So actually these kind of studies are very, very important to inform the policymakers, curriculum developers, because our textbooks in Turkey are evaluated and changed after some periods, and their content is updated. So actually, this is a very significant study in our context, we can say.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, I would hope that this type of research could influence textbook developers, curriculum developers, and, you know, just bring awareness to the person designing a textbook, for example, before it goes to print. Just send it to us and we can take a look and we can advise, you know, how to better represent these types of issues, particularly in terms of gender. I think I mean, it's easy for me to say, but I think it would be, as long as the curriculum designers are open to this type of feedback, I think that would probably be the biggest stumbling block, is not, you know, people not asking for that input and just wanting to plow ahead with whatever they'd like to print, you know, because they want to get the books out and they want to start earning money. But if they could just take that extra time to consult with people to see, you know, and so I think it's more about bringing awareness to the issue. So we would hope that we'd have a practical implication. And if anybody knows any curriculum developers and would like us to analyze their books, we're open to that, to giving feedback.
Right. Thank you very much. I just wanted to end by saying that you are very lucky that, you know, that the government or the policymakers do actually pay attention to studies like this, because it doesn't happen in every part of the world, you know. Certainly in Colombia, it's not that easy. And yesterday I attended a conference, and it was a really interesting study. And one of the questions was about the possibility that the researchers had to influence policy. And the answer was no, because it's not easy. But I did think that probably in Turkey, because I've been reading about the Turkish, you know, education system, and especially what is related to language, I think they take it very seriously. So that's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Molina. Thanks for your interesting remark. I do have one question. There seems to be one question from the audience here. It says, thanks for an interesting presentation. I'm wondering how many chapters you analyzed within these 4 textbooks, and what was the selection criteria?
Yeah, actually, there are 4 main textbooks that are used in high school in Turkey. So we analyze all chapters. In each textbook, there were 10 themes. And under these 10 themes, there were some reading material, speaking activity, listening activity. So we analyzed all of these stuff. And so it was a very exhaustive process. But at the end of the day, we were happy because as 2 women, actually, we are very honored to analyze such a subject.
I'm sure it was a rewarding job to do. So I wonder if that answered the question. And what was your selection criteria? Okay, that was.
We selected all of the textbooks. And especially we selected high schools because, you know, the high school students' awareness are more than a secondary school or primary school, and the content is richer. I mean, the textbook's content is richer.
Great, thank you. There seems to be another question. It says, thank you for your presentation. I was also wondering what the focus of the analysis was, activities / text / images.
Yeah. activities, only activities. We don't consider images and visuals. So in the implication or for further study part, we said that a multimodal analysis could be carried out for further studies.
There's one question that comes up here, and it's as I was listening to your talk, there was something which you named stereotyped imagery. I don't know if you could elaborate a little bit on that, like what type of I mean, it's easy to see what type of stereotype, but what could we call stereotyped imagery in terms of, a textbook, which could be included as part of your findings? Because I think it could be a start point for lots of researchers around the world. And, it's probably it's an issue that does not only apply to the case we are witnessing here, but I'm sure it pretty much applies in every other context around the world. So what could we call a stereotyped imagery?
For example, yeah, Samantha, yeah, please go on. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think, sorry, just one point here is, in terms of the operationalization of gender and sex, first of all, I'd like to mention this, that so in the textbooks, when we started the analysis, we included all, so the continuum of gender. So this is the first important point to raise, is that we started off from a point of analysis of the gender continuum. And once we started to look at the textbooks, it was found that gender was operationalized as either male or female. And so this is the first element to mention, is that in textbooks representing more of the gender continuum, I think it's really important. Gender is not binary. I think that's just an important point I wanted to mention. And Suzanne, if you wanted to pick up on what the stereotypes are exactly.
Yeah, for example, think that there is a visual on the textbook, but it's about a sports team. But the character is male and he's playing the soccer, let's say. But soccer is not limited to males, right? So because females can also play it, because it's just a sport. So this is just a stereotyping image, because subconsciously the characters of this, the students can think that, okay, soccer is special to males.
It's a boys only sport.
Yeah.
As it happens in most countries, unfortunately. Well, this touches a lot of sensitive topics, as Dr. Samantha was saying, like non-binary genders, and there's a lot to it, and I'm sure that'll be a start point for further research, which I'm sure I myself would very much be pleased to dive into in the future. So I was wondering if there are more questions from the audience. It says, thank you, you're welcome. Thank you so much for listening. Okay, I think that's about it, unless we have a last minute question. Thank you very much to our presenters today for such an incredible talk. I myself found it very, very interesting, and I'm sure our audience did as well.
So thank you very much.
Well, Walter, one more thing. I think we should take a picture, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
That was my next point. So before you leave the session,
sorry,
if you could please start your camera. I know it's not easy this early in the morning, especially on a Friday morning. But well, now let me just try to get the right, there we go. So giving you time, your last chance to turn on your camera. There we go, one more participant. So on the count of 3, 1, 2. Oh, there we go. Andrea is also coming in.
Yes. It is so nice to see you smiling, see you all smiling. So thanks for your listening.
That's what a perfect class looks like. Oh, thank you very much. We got one more participant. Let me just
one more person.
One more time.
Yeah.
All right, she's just dropped out. Right, thank you very much. Oh, there you go again. All right, we got more.
There you go.
Got it perfectly. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. It was
Good
great
night,
seeing you.
everybody.
Bye. Have a great one.
Take care. Bye
Thanks
bye.
very much.
Alex, Jamie.
Señor.
Y para informarles que, bueno, hubo una presentadora que no fue a la sala 1 y tuvimos que terminar un poco antes, ¿no? Entonces, por eso quizá hay gente uniéndose acá a la sala.
Ah, listo, perfecto, profe. ¿No se unirán a la sala 2? ¿Será? Como opción.
Sí, también
Ya media
podría ser.
horita.
No se me
Si
ocurrió.
quiere, pues,
Walter, creo que puedes parar la grabación porque empezaste a grabar acá en la sala principal también.
No sé por qué eso te iba a